Okay, we are in Review F. We're going back to the first page of Review F to talk about reflexive verbs. On the first page, it's just a list of the vocabulary, so we're going to go through what the meanings of the verbs are, and then we'll scroll over to the third page to talk about the rules for conjugating the reflexive verbs. But first, we need to start off by knowing which verbs are reflexive. We're not going to do the vocab on the left side. We might come back to that another time. But honestly, I think it's not very, I don't want to ever say that vocab isn't important, but in the grand scheme of things, the Review F vocab isn't that important. So for the sake of time, I'll probably just skip that and we'll focus on the meanings of the reflexive verbs. So we start off with se réveiller. Yeah.
This is F?
This is F, yep. Se réveiller. You may have heard of the term reveille if you went to summer camp, sleepaway camp. Did they ever have a trumpet song that they played first thing in the morning? No? Well, that reference doesn't work. All right, se réveiller is the verb to wake up. I'm going to give you a few verbs and their meanings before I start to explain what reflexive verbs are, because I want you to have a few examples. Se lever. What does a lever do? When I think about physics and simple machines.
Turn something on and off.
It might turn things on and off. What if you think like a seesaw? A seesaw is a lever with the fulcrum at the middle. Up and down. So you push down on one side and it raises, goes up the other side. So the verb lever by itself is the verb to raise. If you remember French one, lever la main, raise your hand. Se lever means to get oneself up. To get yourself out of bed, to get yourself out of a chair. It can be the verb that's used to stand up, but the way that we're going to use it here is more to get yourself up out of bed. And I'm going to go back to se réveiller, and I'm going to say to wake up oneself. It's going to sound awkward, but I'm going to explain why I'm using the word oneself in a minute. Se laver is the verb to wash oneself. Se coucher is the verb to put oneself to bed. Now, some of these sound a little awkward, don't they? Do you often say, I put myself to bed at 10 o'clock last night? No, we don't say that. We say, I went to bed at 10 o'clock. What's going on with these verbs? These are all reflexive verbs. Do we notice anything that they all have in common when we look down the list? What do these verbs all have in common, Colin?
ER.
There's two things. One is the ER and the other is?
SE?
The se, the SE in front of it. The se in front of it is what makes it a reflexive verb. They all happen to be ER verbs, regular ER verbs. That's a great coincidence. That does not mean that every reflexive verb is a regular ER verb. It just happens to be that these are. There are reflexive verbs that are irregular. There are some that are IR verbs, etc. These all happen to be regular ER verbs, but that's a great coincidence. The se in front of it is the part that means oneself. And what makes these verbs reflexive is they all have a direct object. A direct object is something that gets verbed, something that's receiving the action of the verb. That means something or someone is being woken up. Something is being raised up. Something is being washed. Something is being put to bed. But the something that's being done to is the same something or someone that is doing the action. So in se réveiller, I am both being woken up and waking someone up. I'm waking myself up. I'm not waking up the dog. I'm not the parent waking up a child. I'm waking myself up. Which is what you'll say when you just naturally wake up in the morning or your alarm wakes you up. Not when mom comes in to wake you up. Although you guys are in high school, I hope mom doesn't come and wake you up anymore in the morning. But I digress. Se lever, you're getting yourself up. You're not raising something else up. It's not something else raising you up. You're raising yourself up. You're getting yourself up. Se laver, if it doesn't have the se, if it's just the verb laver, it's to wash. To wash the car, to wash the dog, to wash something. But if the person doing the washing and the person being washed are the same person, that's a reflexive verb. Reflexive means that the action is reflected back on the person doing the action. Like a mirror reflects. Se coucher is the person that's being put to bed is the same person doing the putting to bed. It's not, again, the parent putting the child to bed. It's you putting yourself to bed. Now, we don't usually say it as I put myself to bed or I wash myself. I'm writing it this way right now to emphasize that they're reflexive verbs. But when you go to translate stuff like this, you could say that the verb se laver means like I take a shower would be a good way to say it. Okay? Se brosser is the verb to brush oneself. And you might see it as se brosser les cheveux. Do you know what les cheveux is? Hair. Or se brosser les dents. I can't really mime teeth anymore with a mask on, but teeth. Like the word dental, right? So in French, this is going to sound a little awkward, as these verbs already have. In French, we don't say, I brush my teeth, or I brush my hair. We don't use possessives with body parts. It sounds weird, right? We say, I brush myself, the hair, or I brush myself, the teeth. It sounds funny. It's just the way that the language works. You're not brushing someone else's hair or brushing someone else's teeth when it's reflexive. The person doing the brushing is the same person whose teeth or hair is being brushed. So peigner is really similar. It's the verb to comb, which would be followed by les cheveux, to comb one's hair. So let's just say it as to comb one's hair. S'appeler is a verb that you've seen before. You've seen it conjugated, but we've never shown you the infinitive, and we've never talked about why it's reflexive. What you've seen is je m'appelle or tu t'appelles. Remember that? First day of school, we tossed the ball around and we introduced ourselves. That is the infinitive, appeler, and the se here is changing based on the subject. Je me, tu te. We'll see that in a little bit. The double L is a stem changing verb thing. But s'appeler, as an infinitive, it means to call oneself. Does that mean I pick up the phone and I call myself on the phone? No, because that doesn't make any sense. But what it means is the name that you use to refer to yourself is such and such. Se promener is the verb to go for a walk. It sounds way too awkward to say to walk oneself, so I'm not going to say that. If it were not reflexive, if it were just the verb promener, you'd be walking something else. You'd be walking your dog. Or someone yesterday said their cat. Cats don't like to be walked on a leash, but people try to do it anyway. But this is more just to go for a walk, to go for a stroll, to go out by yourself. It's not you walking another animal. Se raser. What does the word raser look like? Does it look like razor? Yes, so we might assume that this is the verb to shave oneself. Again, it sounds awkward to say to shave oneself, but it's not the barber shaving the customer or the veterinarian shaving the dog. It's a person shaving their own face or legs. S'habiller looks like the verb habiter, the verb to live, but it's not, so we don't want to get confused with that. S'habiller is the verb to dress oneself. You're putting the clothes on yourself. You're not the kid putting clothes on the doll or the parent putting clothes on the kid. Why is there a robot soccer ball?
My bad.
That's okay. I was just confused. Okay. Strange things happen every day. Lost my train of thought. S'habiller, to dress oneself. Yeah, okay. Se dépêcher is the verb to hurry oneself. Like when you're in a rush and you're hurrying yourself out the door. It's not when your mom is yelling at you and your mom is hurrying you. That wouldn't be reflexive. It's reflexive because you're hurrying yourself. You're rushing yourself. S'amuser is a very underused verb by students. It's the verb to have fun. It looks like to amuse yourself, but it really is just the verb to have fun. Students always try to do a more literal translate of like avoir, amusement, or something, which is not something that is said in French. So we want to use the verb s'amuser for to have fun. Se maquiller, probably not a verb that you can guess by looking at it, is the verb to put makeup on oneself. It's not the makeup artist putting makeup on someone else, or the actors putting makeup on other people before they go on stage. It's one person putting makeup on their own face. The last one I think you can guess. We know the verb regarder. What does that mean? To watch or to look at. So se regarder, to look at oneself. Okay, to look in the mirror, basically. And that's the list of verbs. You've already noticed that they all start with se, either se or an s apostrophe. And I want to point out the s apostrophe is happening because of the vowel. And in the case of s'habiller, we use an s apostrophe because h is a silent consonant. We don't pronounce it, so it starts with a vowel sound. So we wouldn't say se habiller, we say s'habiller because it starts with the a sound. I'll start with the meanings of the verbs. Okay, so then how do we conjugate them? This is the third page of the notes. We're in the present tense. We spent the last couple classes on the passé composé. We're in the present tense again. One word verb conjugation for the verb. But for reflexive verbs, not only do we have a verb conjugation, we also have a reflexive pronoun. So that word se, or the s apostrophe that's at the beginning of the word, it needs to change according to the subject. Additionally, the ending of the verb needs to change according to the subject. So there are two things that we need to do here. First of all, the reflexive pronoun, the se of the infinitive, is going to change based on the subject. When je is the subject, the reflexive pronoun is me, or m apostrophe. That's what you've seen in je m'appelle. I call myself, or my name is. Je me. When tu is the subject, the reflexive pronoun is te, or t apostrophe. Like you've seen in tu t'appelles, you call yourself, or your name is. For il est long singular, it stays as se, or s apostrophe. And also, I only wrote il, but I should have written il el. It's also se, or s apostrophe, for the il el plural conjugation. So if it's a third person conjugation, the se doesn't change. It stays as se. For nous and vous, these can sound a little silly, especially when you're speaking quickly. Your reflexive pronoun for nous is nous. So when you conjugate a verb, you're going to say nous nous. Nobody wants to laugh, but it is a little silly. It's okay. Vous, vous. You're just going to repeat the word vous. So that's the reflexive pronoun. We also need to conjugate the verb. As I mentioned earlier, these are all regular ER verbs. Great coincidence. To review your present tense ER verb endings, we take off our ER, and how do we end the verb when je is the subject? With just an E. The one thing I want you to be really careful about, we've just spent 3 days working on the passé composé. So you're used to an E at the end of the word having an accent mark on it. A present tense ending does not have an accent mark on it. When tu is the subject, our verb ends in yes. When il est long is the subject, it ends in E. When nous is the subject, the verb ends in ONS. When vous is the subject, it ends in EZ. And when il, elle, plural is the subject, it ends in ENT. So now we're going to give you an example. We're going to use the verb, actually I'm going to leave that visible on the screen. We're going to use the verb se laver as an example. Our reflexive pronoun is coming here, going in this box, and our present tense verb ending is going here on this box, attached to the end of the verb. So it's going to be LAV plus that verb ending in the box all the way to the right. So what that means in this case, when we're conjugating se laver, to say I wash myself, or I shower is how we would probably be more likely to say it in English. We take the reflexive pronoun, je me, LAV is the stem, with an E for an ending, je me lave. When tu is the subject, and you wash yourself, we say tu te lave. You're probably noticing as I'm saying this that the word order doesn't sound right. It's not what you're used to in English. If we were to translate it literally, we say I wash myself, and the word myself goes at the end. But if you're looking at this, it's like saying I myself wash. We just use a different word order in French. It hasn't come up all that much so far, although in French 1, I'm sure you did talk about how your adjectives usually come after the noun, whereas in English they usually go before the noun. So that's one instance where word order is different between the two languages. This is another one. Reflexive pronoun goes in front of the verb. And I should point out for Spanish speakers, reflexive pronouns can never go at the end of a verb. They can't go at the end of an infinitive the way that they can in Spanish. They always go in front of a conjugation. When il, elle, or on is the subject, the reflexive pronoun is se, with an E for the ending. Il se lave, elle se lave, or on se lave. With nous as the subject, we wash ourselves. Nous lavons. With vous as the subject, to say you wash yourselves or you shower, vous lavez. And they wash themselves, ils se lavent. Questions? Make sense? Okay. In a minute, I'm going to put on Google Classroom a practice activity for you to do, but let me just show you what you're going to do here. We've got sentences with a reflexive verb at the end, and you're going to have to take the reflexive pronoun, and you're going to change it to me, te, se, nous, vous, or se, depending on what the subject is. And then you're going to have to take the ER and change it to E, ES, E, ONS, EZ, ENT, depending on the subject. So in this case, tu is our subject, which means we're going to need te, and we're going to need ES for the ending. Yeah, question? I will just in 1 second. I'm just for the purpose of being able to end this video or this recording quickly. I just want to explain this. And then you'll do a translation of the sentence into English. So at what time do you get up? You don't have to say what time do you get yourself up. You can translate it literally. Or you can do it in what I call real people English, the way that we actually speak, what we'd really say. So what time do you get up? There's a second page to this. And I wrote up here, wait. Because what we're going to do is do the first page, go over it, then we'll play Bluk it, whatever the real word is, to practice the meanings of the verbs before I ask you to do any writing about your daily routine. So let's